So, good evening, welcome to another night at the CRIC Festival. This night will be in English. It's been a long time since we started, almost a month. And we are very glad to have to host here tonight for a talk, Creston Davis and Randian. This night is one of the interesting discursive events of the festival. As you know, the main topic of the festival is states of exception, in which we try to approach this topic from different angles and try to see what are their first methods of resistance. We had also a musical part from where we see how certain people develop a creative rage through music. And tonight we will explore and discuss with two very interesting persons who are not engaged directly with the states of exception as such, in sense of criticizing or fighting it, but they try to develop alternatives to the current global capitalism, and also their projects are somehow evading the presence or the territorializing the coding effect of the state. First, we will talk with Creston Davis, and then with Enrique. So we'll start with Creston. Creston is a friend of mine for many years now. He's the founder of, he's a professor of philosophy and the founder of the GCAS Global Center for Advanced Studies, which is a network, globally dispersed network of academic institutions, which function through a certain set of principles, which is solidarity, also providing alternatives to the current educational system, which puts a heavy burden both on academics and also on students. And apart from the formal difference that it makes with the existing dominant form of academia, the substantial part of it is that in times when departments of sociology, philosophy, and the more progressive parts of the universities are being closed down all over the world because they are not markedly profitable, GCAS tries to put forward content that is progressive, emancipatory, and at the end also as knowledge revolutionary in the times where we live. Creston will maybe speak on the organizing of the GCAS worldwide and how many networks does it have and what is the principle of organizing it. But the main feature that connects these two projects, the GCAS and of which Creston is the founder, and the Bank of the Commons and Fairhope, of which Enrique is the founder, is that they try to make use of new technologies in order to provide an alternative for people worldwide. If you tried to do this many years ago, you have to travel a lot. It doesn't mean that both of them don't travel a lot, but now you can access knowledge in academia, but also you can access knowledge on self-organizing and support through the network of Fairhope and Bank of the Commons that bring in together a global community that tries to organize outside of the confines of capitalism and also of the state. I will not take much longer time. I will give the floor to Creston. After his presentation, you can ask questions, and then Creston will answer. And I know Creston's style, which is always very non-formal, which I love.
Yeah, great. I'd like to thank you very much for coming out on a Friday night. It's snowing outside of Skopje, but not. Can you hear me okay if I do this, or I can also hold the mic? Is this okay? Okay, great. Yeah, so it's nice that you all came out, and really part of what I would like to do is also hear your perspective to understand the situation here in Skopje and in the region. I would like to thank Artem.
Yeah, I'm just drinking water.
Awesome. Raki, no. Oops, wow. God did not like that. And I would like to thank Iskara for organizing this, Elena and Artem, and all of you for coming out. And again, let's have a conversation. What I'd like to present is not a formal academic paper, but rather presenting a story, a narrative, but also with some kind of concepts and strategies, with some tactics And of course, we know the strategy is the overall goal. The tactics are the ways in which you get there. And so it's really important that we have an open conversation about this, hearing your perspective. Enrique will talk after. Enrique and I met in the summertime at our summer institute. We have each summer, my school, or the school that we founded, meets up. And Enrique was there, and we got to know each other and have started a collaboration. So my talk and Enrique's talk in some way go together, although in some way also independent. Okay? So, all right. Let me begin then by proposing to you an examination of an idea, a mode of production, which is, of course, the ways in which things are made, how space is created, but also materially, how things are created, but also within that environment, that materialist environment, how we can think thoughts. What kinds of thoughts can we think? And what kinds of thoughts are we unable to think? What can we think collectively together, which is always a good sign of a good conversation, is when you can start to accelerate ideas that are proposed, that you don't just hear them as a passive observer or unable to contribute, but in fact it activates something. And that activation is important dialogically to understand and feel important your ideas that maximize and accelerate and synergize with other people. Okay? So I really want this space to try to create that space, to tap into something greater than just where you are right now in your mind. Okay? And don't worry, I'm not a guru and I don't want to sell you anything. But, so if we start with the idea of mode of production, how something comes about, a car, how the materials from the metal mining to transport to a factory, how materials are assembled together, nuts and bolts, electrical circuits to create a car, right? This is a mode of production. In particular, I would like to focus here on a certain kind of mode of production. There are many, okay? Historically, there's different modes of production. The feudalist mode of production, the capitalist mode of production. We can break things down historically, but we can also break things down in the manner of what Louis Althusser will talk about, the different zones. For example, the family. Growing up, you were taught how to speak in certain ways, certain jokes, certain linguistic structures are happening inside of a family, right? Which is always dangerous when you end up with a partner outside your family and you bring them in, they don't understand the rules and regulations and so on, and how it gets. But there's other realms too. There's religious spaces, right? And then there's media, there's internet, there's different zones. But the mode of production, I would like, or what Karl Marx called the Protodenkweise, is in fact a knowledge, a mode of production by which knowledge, it gets distributed. And for this mode of production in society, you typically go to the university. University is a place of serious learning, rigorous ways in which you account for history, how ideas fit together or not, right? But I would like to begin then by exploring the mode of production of how knowledge is created from a university setting, okay? And when you look at this and you examine a mode of knowledge production, let's say, I would like to now briefly talk about the history of the mode of knowledge production in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, and increasingly in Europe, okay? This mode of knowledge production in the 1970s with the emergence of the Powell memo in 1971, Lewis Powell, the neoliberal, the Chicago understanding of neoliberalism, whereby the economy becomes more and more privatized for a very few amount of people, less regulation, which starts to neutralize and disturb a democratic, even a liberal democratic way in which humans relate to each other. The greatest expansion in the economy after World War II was in the 50s and 60s, where income was at its greatest, where voting, people, at least in the United States, people were voting, they were more active, they had time, their salaries were enough to have a house, a family, not have to go into debt, and they had time for social interaction. But of course, in the 1970s, this became a threat. With the late 60s, with the student uprisings, which happened here in the Balkans and elsewhere in the world. And this became a threat. This threat was various think tanks came together and they organized a different mode of production that, and they targeted certain sectors. One sector that they targeted was the university. And so the story goes, in the late 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you could go to university in the United States and work a summer job and pay off the tuition. And you could go to university and pursue so-called the American dream, which we know is BS, bullshit, but it was still, there was social mobility. There was still something of you didn't have to go into debt. And we know, of course, you had a guest speaker here from The Making of the Indebted Man. Yes, and his book is amazing. How debt is used as a coercive mechanism. This was used, of course, internationally with the IMF, the World Bank, and the Balkans is a result of that in creating different zones, economic zones around the world. Not just creating them, but reproducing them. This is a very important concept. How do you reproduce the very mode of production that excludes people from knowledge, excludes people from social interaction, and so on, from freedom of expression, etc. So welcome. There's some seats here if you would like to come. So again, I'm just going to give you some figures so you have an idea of, and I'm rehearsing the way in which the mode of knowledge production in a university, it shifts dramatically, okay? Hello? So, when Ronald Reagan came to office in 1980, the US president, he implemented a massive cut in social tax, okay, across the board. He and Margaret Thatcher, drawing on this neoliberal ideology, starts to cut massive tax that the rich or the wealthy would pay. And so the university's funding was cut 78, 79%. Okay? Now, if you own a business and your funding was cut 78, 79%, it's kaput. You're done. But here was the strategy. They said, well, look, we're gonna not, the public's no longer going to, it's not a social good anymore to have public education. It's no longer a social good. It doesn't benefit society. Rather, the philosophical shift was to the individual. You as an individual, you are your own business. You're your own corporation. You're responsible for yourself. It's a very Randian, if I can use this loosely. Okay, an individualize, a hyper-individualization that imagines in a space like our room that we're all atoms. And it's like survival, the TV series Survival Game or something like this, where there's one prize and all of us in here, only one person's going to rise to the Uberman and win. Or the Uber woman, sorry, I didn't mean to be exclusive there. You get the idea. So now that the university is being cut 78, 79%, how do you make up for this? Well, the only real way to do that is to start to charge students massive tuition costs. Now, this already affects disproportionately working class and middle class and poor sector of society. Okay? If you're from the upper class, who cares? Okay, you write a check out. But, so now, how does someone from a working class background, like myself, go to university? Well, it costs too much to go. But this is where the neoliberal paradigm starts to step in. It says a private bank or the government will guarantee a loan to you if you get accepted into university. Wow, I get a loan, this is great. In fact, in the 80s, these loans, student loans, started to emerge. It was a kind of a prototype test for what happened to the financial collapse in 2008. These are basically a subprime loan. I, as a person coming from a working class family, do not have access to assets to pay for education. So I have to get a loan. Okay, what does this do, in fact? How does this, and what I'm proposing to you is it's socially engineered to fuck the system. Can I use this word, yes. French word? It's a very delicate French word. To jam the system, okay? To socially engineer the system that over time, over generations, puts the society as a whole into a massive crisis, okay? And the crisis is upon us now, okay? So, again, the government says, I will give you the loan if you get accepted to university. Great. Well, today, now 30 years later, 3 decades later, you have $1.5 trillion in student debt. There's more student debt than there is debt for mortgages, for houses. There's more debt in the United States than medical debt, or car loans, or consumer debt. In fact, the percentage of rise in this kind of debt is now 1,420% this year. 1,420% rise. And who's getting this money? Well, the government gets some of it, right? But the government loans it out to private banks. So the private banks now have all this kind of interest, what they call floating, right? They can use this money to invest in other things, okay? And now you can see over time the disproportionate way in which you as a student goes into student loans, and over time in a massive social structure, the social map, causes massive problems, okay? I'll give you some more statistics. The average American student who graduates with a bachelor's degree now is going to be in debt $40,000 with a loan that's around 17% interest per year. By the time, in 20 years, if you were to pay that $40,000 off in 20 years, that debt at $40,000 turns into $128,000, okay? In other words, you'll never get, it's designed to trap you. Younger generation have graduated with massive debts, and if you're from the poor and working class, the 40,000 is doubled. It's almost doubled. It's 73, 74,000. Again, over time with the interest rates, it's close to $250,000. What does this do so economically? Well, it prevents you from going into businesses for yourself to develop new ideas, new innovations, to solve problems that we need to solve, like, for example, sustainability, ecologically more sustainable activities. It prevents you, small businesses, okay, so we're not talking corporations here, we're talking just your Joe business, okay, like you make shoes. Small businesses are down 80% from the 70s, okay? Conglomerates have monopolies have eaten up the economy. We know this. Look at Amazon, for example, if you know this story recently, right? Get massive $2 billion tax cuts to come to New York and to Seattle. $2 billion, okay? So you can start to see the neoliberal social engineering and how it functions educationally with respect to one's own debt. Now, how does this function, though, when you look at it in terms of education as such, the mode of production of knowledge? Well, what does this do? It sends the signal that you must get a degree that will pay off the loan. So now knowledge is not obtained for being able to be a critical thinker, for being able to propose democratic alternatives, It's there primarily for jobs. So now the university, which was once designed to be slightly outside of society, to call into check businesses, the corporations. Thomas Jefferson, one of the architects of the Constitution, had a great fear of a corporate takeover. Because, well, look at New York City, for example, 1624. It was founded by the West Indies Company. It was a corporation, and to this day, in my mind, New York City is a corporation. When you walk through Manhattan, you feel like you're in a bank. Okay, these spaces are being territorialized for the one percenters, which anthropologically is another way. Remember the Middle Ages when you had God and you had the angels and you had humans and animals. Well, there's a new form of hierarchy that is emerged with the neoliberal outlook. The hierarchy is if you own more money, more assets, you're actually higher up on the hierarchy of humanity than if you're in debt or you're poor. This is the way in which it's structured, especially if you're a woman of color or you're a minority, you're a migrant. Look what's happening, for example, with the new isolationisms that have taken over in Europe and in the United States, in Chile, in Brazil, and so on. Okay, so I'm speaking to the choir, I hope, right? Everyone's sort of on board with this. Now, here comes the moment of critique in the talk. So, the social engineering is, the education itself is a vocation, an act of getting a job. So, smaller universities or colleges that are there for liberal arts colleges, the art of thinking, as opposed to the servile arts of, say, plumbing or electricity or engineering, okay? These are servile arts. These are basic arts, okay? It doesn't take an art, a certain kind of delicate artistic moment in thinking it's as such, right? Designing a sentence that connects with the human spirit, this kind of thing, or being able to teach and connect ideas together. This is an art form, right? Well, the arts have been massively marginalized because of the vocational social engineering of the mode of production of knowledge creation from the debt, okay? And so, how does this in fact function? Well, I was tenured as a professor at a university in the United States in Florida. And over the time of being tenured, 6 years, 7 years, you have students that come back to you because you make relationships with human beings. They come back to you and the students were saying, look, I have this degree now, I'm in debt $100,000, I can't get a job. Okay, 40% of college graduates are either underemployed or unemployed, 40%. So now not only do you have a debt, a massive debt, that you can't go to a bank and say, I have a business idea, give me a loan to help me start a business. You can't do that anymore, okay? So 40% will end, and this is after investing in yourself in the neoliberal idea. So it's a failed project. And after I was starting to do more and more investigations into this, I realized that this system is broken. Not only is it broken, but it's in Canada, it's in the UK, it's in Chile, and it's more and more in Europe. Master's degrees now cost money, right? PhDs cost money. Bachelor's degrees still in Europe, there's still holdouts. In Germany, of course, it can be free. Again, you can see the wave of the neoliberal wave emerging and growing globally. Okay, now, I started to think seriously about a different model. What would a different model look like? And so I'm going to present to you this model, okay, and its failures and successes. I'm not going to stand up here and say, well, I figured it out, like, haha, E equals MC squared in the mode of production of knowledge, haha. Okay, no. It's a conversation, always in need of being critically engaged. So this is where you come in, so please. So in 2011, I started to build this model, okay, on paper. And then in 2013, I asked some of my friends, like Slavoj Žižek, Alain Badiou, and over 100, including Artan, and over 100 different intellectuals, writers, Pulitzer Prize winners, Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And we created the Global Center for Advanced Studies on the idea that together, the professors, those who profess truths to the world, profess liberation. Let's face it, that's what education after the Enlightenment is about. It's not about how the monasteries in the Middle Ages simply reproduced the empire of the Catholic Church. Okay, it had its different variations. Nominalism in the School of Paris, different forms in Oxford and Bologna. Okay, these monasteries were originally where the universities emerged. Okay, and what did they do? They reproduced the religious ideology. Again, we're talking about the reproduction of how we can perceive as human beings. In my mind, I believe we can create environments in which we as human beings can engage the power of thinking, the power of our bodies being able to function together in a way that can emancipate us from the banality and the enslavements that have been put over us. Okay, that sounds utopian, but there are moments historically where this has happened. Okay? And even probably if you're a thinker or an artist, you've been in these moments yourself. But what would happen if these moments that you are working on a project, you're working on a novel, a story, an equation, and suddenly that eureka moment happens? Wow, you see deep insight into something different. Suppose we could do that synergistically in a multiplicity of bodies and minds. That's the idea of knowledge production. But then the question is, how do you keep reproducing that? You're familiar maybe with the great war theorist Clausewitz, Josef von Clausewitz. And he has two really important insights. And this insight is very important for us here when we're thinking about knowledge production. His idea when he wrote on war, as the great Prussian war theorist, is to win a war, you have to actually make someone else's will, your opponent's will, fold to your will. Okay? So it's an either or. On opposition, you have a different take on reality, I have a different take. I want your reality to fold to my reality. So I must figure out a way to bend your will, to break you, so that you fold to my reality. This is a basic premise of war. The second one is this. How do you prevent resistance to your will, to your production and reproduction of the world as you see it? How do you prevent and neutralize the resistance to your position? Okay, you think about U.S. foreign policy. How do they break the backs of potential opponents and resistances? Well, you develop IMF. You give loans out. And then through those loans, they're traps, right? And then you can develop different zones, economic zones. First world, second world, third world. And you can keep reproducing those zones. The EU is one such modality in which you reproduce inequality, okay? And we can talk about that later. So his answer to this, in terms of resistance, is you must be able to neutralize the resistance of your opponent's ability to keep resisting. It's simple, right? If you're a resistor, if we can neutralize your material way to keep resisting, then we win. We will fold your will to the will of the power, right? This is a fascist moment. This is a kind of a neo-fascism emerging philosophically. When we talk about education as a mode of knowledge production and reproduction, how do you keep reproducing that moment in which there's collective power of ideas that are materialized? How do you neutralize that? Well, there's different ways. I will put that question to the side for a moment. So in 2013, we came up with a different model of education. The Global Center for Advanced Studies is a nonprofit. And that nonprofit was registered by the state. The state regulates the university. You can go on a website and create, well, some have tried to create a university just by a website. Okay, but it ultimately has to be regulated. Who regulates it? The state regulates it. If you start saying stuff that the state doesn't like, you get shut down. If you think about the birth of Western philosophy in Macedonia, with the Athens, with Plato. These were outside the city, out in the shadows, in the olive groves of the city of Athens. And what happened with Socrates, according to Plato's Apology, right? The Senate didn't like what Socrates was doing with his teachings, so they had to neutralize his way of reproducing knowledge production, and they put him to death. Okay? Philosophically, if you have an idea, or artistically, if you have ideas that are too much in the face of power, it will be shut down. So then the question becomes strategically, how do you keep being able to reproduce the conditions of knowledge production and reproduction in a way that can circumvent state regulation? Or, to put it in our terms, the neoliberalization of the world. Looking at you as a commodity, me as a commodity. All right? How do you do that? Well, this is part of our strategy. In 2017, we moved to Europe because it was, for many reasons, in terms of being accredited. Accreditation, for example, of a university, we're about to be accredited in a couple of weeks, for example. Accreditation in the EU is much cheaper and faster than it is in the United States. To be accredited in the United States, to be an actual legitimate university, right, you have to be accredited. How long does this take? It takes about $6 million, and it takes about 7 years to be accredited in the United States for a bachelor's. Okay? Now, what signals is that sending? Only the wealthy can actually create a university. And state universities? Oh, we already have a university. Yes, but you're putting your students through massive debt. And you've turned your university into a trade school. So this thinking is dying. It's the only way to explain why somebody like an imbecile like Trump could even be elected, because you have to dumb down over a course of generations ideas and how people think, right? In order to get a popular moment to bring to power an imbecile, right? And this is the death of democracy. We're living in this, right? So we're trying to think of ways in which we can create democratic possibilities by reproducing knowledge production and reproduction. The EU is one way. Okay, I talked, the EU is a neoliberal bureaucratic organization, and it's true. But in terms of being accredited, this was our mode. This was our tactic to the overall strategy. It was one tactic among many. Okay, so we created the school. Now, we turned it from a non-profit into a for-profit. Now, alarms should immediately go off in your heads. Wait, you were just talking about the perils and the dangers of privatization. Didn't you just fold your whole model into a privatized corporation, private? No. The answer is no. Why? Because faculty co-own the university. And if you graduate, the money that you spent tuition-wise on the university gets converted into ownership shares. So it's a collaborative. You can't own a university while you're a student, because this would be a conflict of interest. I'm just giving you some tactics here, okay? So when you graduate, you actually own part of the university. Your voting rights are equal to that of any faculty. It's similar to how you would become an apprentice to learn how to lay bricks. But then when you you know how to lay bricks after years, then you become equal partners with the so-called master who taught you. And this is the idea of having to reproduce knowledge production. Okay, by having the students, when they graduate, become equal partners with faculty in owning the university. The second one is that we've opened up other centers around the world. One is in Sydney, Australia. One is in Santiago, Chile. One is in New York. One is in Dublin. That's our main headquarters. We just were given a farm, an 18-acre farm in Bordeaux, where we have a self-sustaining farm where we do art projects on the farm, where students will come for a semester and do art with growing crops, feeling the lettuce that they are growing, and being able to digest that in relationship to colors, in relationship to thinking, in relationship to exchanging ideas that are themselves not divorced from eating, from reproducing your own mode of existence. that in some way is starting to move outside total state control. Okay, as long as you're in France or in the EU, you're still under state control. Let's not put up shenanigans. I have some snake oil I can sell you after. It's not like that. We have to be careful, but I want to give you these examples. Now, let's step back into the university itself. And then I'll come to a different alternative mode, and then Enrique will go. Okay? An alternative mode of how we can produce knowledge in a way that can be reproduced. It's not just simply a utopian, Badiouian idea of event. Oh, there's the event. Done. It's over. Right? No. You have to sustain that event. You have to sustain the commune. You have to sustain collectivities and bodies and disagreements and all kinds of things. Crime and hatred and joy and love, right? You have to sustain all these things together. Now, we step back into the mode. In the university, there are some, not a lot anymore, but there used to be a lot more, but there are some still left-wing, let's call them left-wing professors, okay? And they're in a university. They're getting paid by the university, and they have this idea. They take it very seriously, like I did when I was being trained to do a PhD and so on. They have this idea that, wow, I can liberate humanity from its constrictions. Great. You're in a university, you're getting paid, you have an office, you have a classroom like this space here. Each student that comes to your classroom to learn about how to become a revolutionist feminist, a revolutionist, a critical thinker, they have to go into debt to sit in your goddamn classroom in order to learn how to liberate them fucking selves. Right? It's a contradiction. In other words, it's a socially engineered so that you can be a happy leftist and write and publish and reproduce all this awesome stuff. But at the end of the day, when you talk materially, you're asking your student to go into debt and to be forced into the slave labor markets of corporations. You're not giving them the possibility of exercising what you're actually saying in the real world with their bodies. It's disjointed. So, I will say this, we were talking last night whether I should mention this. Early on, we had a lot of people come on. Yes, this is great, this is a good model, we support it. But we also had our dissenters. One dissenter was Judith Butler, with whom I had worked. I had co-written a piece with her. She and I worked on a few projects, and her partner Wendy Brown. There were others. And I simply asked them, we were doing a class online, because we use online technologies, because we didn't have to buy a goddamn building and go to a bank and beg for a loan to buy a building in which to actually have education. So now you can see how we can use the technologies to actually start to express ideas, but without having to go into debt, right? This is one of the tactics that we use for the overall strategy. And I was putting together a class on women philosophers and resistance, this kind of stuff. And I had brought together well-known feminists. And I was like, okay, we want to hear you speak, okay? And so I simply invited Judith and Wendy, hey, why don't you all join? We'll give you a couple €100 and you can talk. It'll be free for the world. Anybody with an internet connection can come in and take your class and listen and learn, ask questions. And immediately, not only did they write back to me, but they CC'd the Chronicle of Higher Education and called me the Bernie Madoff of education. And those of you who don't know Bernie Madoff, he was a scam artist. He was a criminal. And they were accusing me of using using their names, big names, whoa, to get students and to make money. Okay, we have never made money. Any money we make, we give to professors. We give to overhead. We give to accountants. We give to tax lawyers. Okay? And they called for an investigation. And I was like, for sure, please do investigate us. We need the marketing to get the word out. And so we did have detractors. And to my mind, this started to ring a bell.
that you can be a top academic theorist, a superstar, and you can say awesome stuff in your books. Like when I read them, it's awesome. It's really insightful. But when it comes time to actually make a difference with your body, not just with your words, being privileged in the ivory tower, when it comes time to actually doing it, to give up your job in the elitist academy, the corporate academy, I would call it, to create something new for the sake of liberation, now you're suddenly a criminal. You see? I use that example in the book that I'm doing, and I'm giving you sort of an overview of the book. I will be publishing this material and others besides. I call out Judith and Wendy because I respect what they're saying and I agree with what they're saying. But if you just read a book and you go, that's really great. But if you're unable to actually make that world happen, it's just a fantasy. And this is where I would call the left progressives in the American Academy are hypocrites. I'm not going to shy away from that. I love them, they're my friends. I know their hearts are there to transform the minds of people. But until they're willing to give up their jobs in the corporate university and actually create something new, they're still stuck. Okay, I love Naomi Klein, okay? She's a friend of mine. She's an awesome writer. But they keep telling us the same shit. We know the world's going to hell. Anybody with an IQ above Donald Trump's, which isn't hard to do these days, knows the world's going to hell. We know this. We don't need another book to tell us. We need action. And this is the whole point of the school. So we incorporated as a collective way. And the last thing I'll say, and this will be a segue to the next talk. I'm sorry if I took so long. Is this wine? We'll share in the mode of production.
Fruits of production, then.
Exactly. The libation from Dionysus. Another way to do this from a level of a mode of production is by using a crypto economy. Now I know this might sound really bizarre and strange. We've implemented a crypto, and here's how it works. It's very simple. Let's say you're students in the school, but you can't afford the tuition, okay? Our tuition is 5,000 euros a year, but most people pay on average 1,700 a year, okay? And at the end of when you graduate, that 1,700 that you pay per year goes into equity shares, okay? So it's not like we're actually getting the school is not getting any money from it. I can tell you how we're actually funding the school if you want to know. One way is through crypto. So let's say you're from Macedonia, where the economy is lower than, let's say, in California, which is the 4th largest economy in the world. And you want to be part of this, you qualify, you're really good at thinking and ideas and so on, but you just can't afford even 1,700 euros. How do you do it? Well, through our crypto coin. We call GCAS, is Global Center for Advanced Studies, GCAS. GCash, that's what we call it. Great. It's a good marketing tool. Now, let's say you're good at designing something, or you want to promote our school. You can promote it through social media, through friends, through asking others, your friends, to participate, and through this, you actually earn crypto tokens that we keep track of, a wallet, and then at the end of each month, you claim what you've done. I wrote a blog, or I did a video, or I told some friends who are now enrolled, or want to enroll. Then we reward you with those tokens. We reward your work hours, which globally is around 10 euros an hour. So if you're on a project with us, you're in a committee doing stuff with us, you get 10 euro, the equivalent of around 10 euros an hour. We're trying to move that up to more like 12, 15, but for right now, where we are, it's around 10. And then we just simply keep track of that. that through our collaborator, the Economic Space Agency, with Tara Vaden, who created the Robinhood Co-op, right? If you're familiar with the Robinhood Co-op, it's an alternative way of lending money. And at the end of the month, then your wallet just gets registered, and you can apply the tokens that you received from doing various projects to the tuition. And now you can have free education. But you've helped us market, so we don't have to goddamn give money to a stupid marketer in Silicon Valley who charges money and pulls our resources away from our body, our community. We keep it in-house. And now you can start to see how we can create an ecosystem that feeds off of itself and therefore, and this is where I'll end, reproduces the mode of knowledge, exchange, and distribution. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. We'll take a few questions before we move to...
Was that too long? Was that too long?
A little bit longer than we agreed. Okay, before we move to ending, do you have specific questions? Or maybe we can take gather questions because they will kind of correlate with each other, the two presentations. If someone needs more time, then you can have your questions later. Or if someone has an immediate question, you can pose it now.
Yes. What is your name?
Casper.
Casper.
Good to hear you talk and really enjoyed it. I was going to ask, what is the asset that people have a share in later? If you graduate and you become a shareholder of the center,
yep.
what is the actual tangible asset that...
Okay, so right now, our school is worth around 6 million euros. And so the idea here is that you wouldn't just simply graduate and sell your shares. Mm-hmm. Okay, a share is worth around 6 euros. Okay, so if you have 1,700 euros, you divide that per year times 3 years, whatever that number is, divide that into 6, and that's how many shares you'll get. Mm-hmm. You have 10 years. You have to keep it there for 10 years. You can't sell it. After 10 years, you can sell 50%. After 15 years, you can sell 75%. Mm-hmm. After 20, in other words, it's an investment long-term for you. And as we're scaling and grow in value, which we have a model, and we're implementing more streams of revenue to support us, then your investment grows. So one idea is, and I'll be quick here, when you graduate with a BA, let's say you spent $5,000 a year times 3, that's 15,000, and you get that much in capital at our current rate. By 2025, our projections is that 15,000 would be more like 45,000, okay, 1525. So by the time you could sell it at 100%, that 15,000 investment would be more like 300,000. So in other words, you can buy a goddamn house by doing a degree with us.
Mm-hmm. But the assets are what? It's all the buildings that you own.
They own it.
Yeah, okay.
They're part owners of every asset, including the farm that we have, including the campus we were going to purchase. They're totally into the asset. Everything is distributed.
Okay. Then
it's a socialism.
Yeah, but then
it's Yugoslav worker self-management through internet.
Yeah, it's something like a hybrid.
But then, is there a problem if you get more and more graduates? And
over time, we can. Yes, over time we do have an algorithm. Okay, so Mark Sardi, a professor, a friend of mine from Harvard School of Business, he and I designed this algorithm. So over time, let's say in 5 years, we have more students coming in, okay? Mm-hmm. Either we keep growing at a certain rate, which is fine, or let's say our growth slows. Then we dilute the value of each share. Okay, we issue more shares. Okay, right. So there is a dilution possibility. But it depends. If everybody keeps working together on this, then as long as there's growth that way, there's growth other ways. If there's not, if it's stymied, everyone understands, and you understand as you come in to this agreement that if growth is stunted or goes down, so does your share value. Does that make sense? It's normal.
I mean, there's a lot of variables there, but I've got the feeling that
general model,
that you got all of them sort of.
Yes, we do have a very, very specific algorithms that apply to this. Yeah.
Is there another question?
So that means everyone here should be part of the school. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, then, thank you,
Great.
Creston.
All right, thanks.